So a lot of what's held me back over the years are what I consider um, kindergarten shop problems, right? And what that is like you remember going to get your whatever 4 or 5 year old shots for school. Um, it's painful. You're a 5 year old kid, right? Like alcohol, blah. And then so the rest of your like elementary school career, when you have to go in for the other shots, it's got this huge anxiety built up in your head. You know you're going in, you might be crying, sweating, whatever, but it just becomes this awful experience. And I know a lot of adults that like are still terrified of shots, to this day. And they're really, like they're not bad. It's a little bit worse than a mosquito bite. And there's no reason that we should be that terrified of them that we are. It's like we've scraped, broken bones, scraped our knees, done all these other things that probably hurt way worse, but we have this image in our head that's just like seared in there from those kindergarten shots. And I think a lot of the problems in our heads that prevent us from doing things that we want to do or know that we should do stem from kindergarten shop problems, right? Like I have known for a long time that I should put out more content, talk about the things I'm interested in, talk about the stuff I know with business, copyright, marketing, do more self promotion, stuff like that. But there's probably something in my past, in elementary, middle school, where I said a weird thing or did something that some other kids didn't like and I got made fun of. And now, whenever I would go to create content or talk about something I was interested in that I thought might be a little bit weird, that memory comes up or, that feeling comes up, that anxiety comes up, and I don't do it. And the thing is, just like if you get enough shots, right, as an adult, whether it's, routine blood draws or different things like that, you start to realize over time it's not that bad, I take a medication where I have to go in and get an IV done, on a pretty regular basis. And for a while I was like, oh my God, I get tense up and sweaty and everything like that because, I had a bad experience with getting a blood draw once and that was stuck in my head. But over time, now I'm just like, okay, do it, doesn't matter. Oh, that one didn't go in. Cool. Doesn't matter. Just do it again. It doesn't bother me at all anymore because I've realized now as an adult, like I was making out to be a bigger deal in my head. And, even though I'm only on day 3 of this 100-day challenge thing, I have noticed it is much easier to start. I don't have that fear that I did, um, you know, and it's not to say it's gone. It's just easier to act in spite of it. Like this morning, I have kind of put off starting for a little bit longer. I mean, I maybe 20, 30 minutes, right? Um, whereas, it took me years before, or, even when I decided to do this, it took me a couple weeks to start. And then the first day, it took me a few hours, to actually push record, things like that. So it's cool to see how quickly you kind of start to desensitize, and start to like let go of those fears when you actually just start doing the thing. Um, so do the thing and do it more and do it often, do a lot, and see what happens, right? Um, let's see what else. I'm gonna try. Experiment with a way to try to do like string some topics together. So there's kind of a coherent long form YouTube version of this, maybe. Because I might experiment with like posting on my personal Facebook page too with the whole video. So yeah, I'm gonna see how well these topics kind of flow together from one to the other, but at least they're gonna be good for the short form. So we'll see. It's all an experiment, having fun, right? Mm. And to I guess to continue on from the whole kindergarten shot example is creating content is, an excellent form of therapy, personal growth, business growth. I think one of the best ways to do it, or at least the best way that I have found and heard from other people. And it's not, and I don't mean that in coming out and using content as like a personal journal, just blabbing all about your problems. Like, no, like we need to keep private things private. That's your personal journal, personal conversations. We don't need to put that stuff on the internet. But you know, it's more about working through the thoughts in your head and like finding clear and concise ways to articulate your ideas, right? So, for example, um, you, how many times have you said something to someone or tried to explain something to someone, and as soon as it comes out of your mouth and they don't have this immediate reaction, like, that sounded way better in my head, or that sounded way different in my head, right? We we can sometimes like fantasize or make up stories or just have something that just doesn't quite meet with reality, but up in our head, it just seems clear as day. And if we don't put it out into the world, then, we never really know if the thoughts that we're having, like how useful they are, right? I think correct and incorrect is dangerous, Terry, but like how useful they are. But also, communication is everything in life, right? Like we are a species that have gotten to where we are because of our ability to communicate and work together. And one of the most important parts of communication is being able to clearly articulate your thoughts to another person in such a way um, that they're able to take in that information and do something with it, right? The do something part is what I believe is so often missed right now. And I think that has a lot to do with our asynchronous communication styles with texting and Slack and email and all of that. We can now communicate with someone and there's almost not an expectation of doing anything with that information a lot of the times, or, at least an underlying part of it. Cause how often are you bombarded with requests from clients or bosses or coworkers or family members or friends. And if you just ignore it for a day or two, they completely forget about it. Right. So that, and also, this ability to communicate with someone anytime that we decide to, like whether, with a complete disregard for what's going on in their life or what they might be doing. It allows us to be very sloppy with our words, right? And sloppy with our thoughts. And we just kind of get this instant gratification of just like, put this out there, send this to them, be done with it, right? We don't take that time to sit with it and be like, hey, like, is this, really worth talking about, really worth doing? Is this really important enough? Like I remember even, like we don't even have to go that far back. Like remember back to the days when you only had a certain amount of minutes or a certain number of text messages that you can send for your cell phone plan. Or there was free minutes between these hours or after these hours or on these days, things like that. And, we had to be much more cognizant about what we were saying and what we were talking about. So, clearly articulating that. And if you keep going, even further and further back, for most of human history, we pass down knowledge through verbal communication, right? I think that's a big reason why video has blown up to such a large extent, and especially, with social media and vlog style content like this, it's because for most of our existence and most of what we have kind of been evolutionary selected for is to pass down and remember knowledge about how to live and survive through verbal communication, through stories, right? Written language was only a couple thousand years old, and, mass literacy, global literacy, is only very recent, the last, not even a couple hundred years, right? I mean, there's still probably big parts of the world who can't read, but even in like industrialized or kind of civil, first world ish, like that's not even good. But like in areas where it has been easy to get written materials, books and things, mass literacy is only recent, the last, 100, 150 years, maybe even less. I mean, there's still people alive, like grandparents, like 70s, 80s, 90s who are not literate. So, um, kind of went off on a tangent and a rabbit hole. Which actually, that's kind of jumping ahead, but leads into it. I think, actually, yeah, perfect, perfect. So this kind of leads into then how I think about content and my hypothesis around content based on a lot of what I've seen with other people working and things I've done for my clients, and now what I'm experimenting with myself is first off, this what I just said, that importance of learning clear and concise communication, right? To be able to articulate those ideas. And I think when we create content for social media, especially as like business owners, coaches, experts, people who have some sort of monetary outcome tied to the content they create, their lifestyle, their income, what they do is based on creating content that attracts the right kind of people to pay money. It's difficult to just talk in front of a camera here because we think so much about saying the right thing in the right way at the right time, because some guru, course, whatever told us to, because the algorithm needs it to look like this and sound like this and be like this for it to go viral and for all the people to hear it and for your business to blow up and for it to be successful. And if you don't do it like that, if you only get 100 views or only get 200 views or only get 1,000 views, you are a failure. And that sounds like a lot of pressure. But if you think of it more like a coffee conversation, with a friend that you haven't seen in a while, someone who has a lot of similar interests as you, struggled with similar things as you grew up, and life just, you kind of drifted apart, and you're catching back up, and you're telling them all about, what you're doing with their life, and, they're telling you about what they've been doing with their life, and, you notice that, hey, you can help them, right? This is your good friend, right? But like what you do now can really legitimately help them. But they're your good friends, so you don't want to come off as like some scammy MLM person just trying to get them to come to buy their Tupperware or supplements or things like that, right? Think of how you talk to your friend about what you do and how you do it and how you help people and the things that you see in the industry and the things that you're interested, right? Nerd out a bit with them, and treat them like a human, right? I think when we make human-centered content, that's when we really win. And part of that is going on tangents and side quests and nerding out about topics. I mean, look, and TikTok's a great place to discover this, just how many weird, strange things are blowing up, right? Like, there's a woman on TikTok who looks like a character from A Nightmare Before Christmas, and she does these incredible lip syncing videos and has like these huge, expressive, awesome eyes, and is incredible about using her face and her eyes to convey these different emotions, and blows up, right? People homesteading, right? Like who knew social media, especially TikTok, would be a place where talking about homesteading, raising chickens in your yard would be a thing that blows up, right? Like growing up, I didn't know it was not a thing. Like I had no idea you could have chickens in your yard. I thought that was something that had to be on farm. You had to have something special for it. And like most places, apparently you can't have chickens or meat rabbits or, different things like that. So who knew? Who knew? And there's so many other examples like that out there. So going on those tangents, talking about the weird things, going on the side quest, stuff like that, that's where you really kind of like find audiences or like go viral the right way, right? When you just like suddenly hit a chord with people or hit a nerve with people about something. Look at some of these TikTok music artists. The guy that really blew up for the rich men north of Richmond, right? That guy. He'd been creating music and singing songs and posting on TikTok for a while, right? Just as kind of his thing, just something that was his sort of therapy, just doing something, creating something, put it out in the world. And just one day he had this song come up and it came out and bam. And you can't script that, right? You can't predict that. You can't game the system to do that. There's some cases you can find, sure, if that's what you want to do, great. But this sounds way more fun. And it sounds a lot more fun to think of it as a conversation with a good friend, because I think that's where a lot of, commerce and business and the way we transact and use money in the future is going to be a lot more of, essentially paying people that we would hang out with to do cool things with, or to have interesting conversations, or share knowledge on a subject, right? Whether it be joining a community of people who like to travel to similar places and do similar things on there, right? And every quarter you guys go on a trip, and that's that community. And then you have another local community of people who garden and grow food, and you all kind of exchange vegetables, or different things like that. Or you have, even like local hikes, you pay someone to take you on a mountain biking tour or something like that, and they have all the bikes and things like that. And you can't do that if all you're trying to do is game the algorithm, right? Because people want those unique experiences. Look at how many people like flipping furniture on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, building like these unique, really expensive custom tables out of crazy pieces of wood. Stuff like that is blowing up. So be unique and weird. Let that unique and weird flag fly. Okay, which rolls in then to like, what is value? And I think that's such a thrown around word these days. And because it's become so esoteric, right? Especially with social media and things becoming more and more digital, it's like we have, like think of this, like buying clothes, people will happily spend hundreds of dollars on a shirt or pair of pants or something like that they wear a couple times a year, or sometimes even once. Like how often do you hear of women spending hundreds of dollars on bridesmaid dresses or dresses for special occasion? That's the only time they wear it, and we don't think anything of it. But a kid wants to spend $20, $50 on a skin for his character in some video game that he plays 3 to 4 hours a day, several days a week. That's crazy to us, even though like, if the point of these things are to be seen by other people, he's getting way more value out of that $20 or $50 skin than this person did from that dress. But here's where it gets even more interesting and weird, and the stuff I like to explore and think about. For that woman, she got more value wearing that dress that single time than the cost of it, right? Otherwise, she wouldn't have bought it, right? So she valued that single experience, that single night, more than the $100 and everything that she had to do to earn that several $100s, right? So that also, that's why it's so important to understand the unique audience that you serve and that you want to serve and that you fit in with and that you like to interact with, because both of those beliefs about value are absolutely correct and absolutely useful for each individual person. But you can't make the other person believe, like what's right for the one isn't right for the other, right? That's just like, they're not going to agree. And that's fine. I think that's such a hard concept for us to understand because, for most of our time, like we grew up with not having a lot of that choice, right? Like if it wasn't at your local Walmart, like you didn't get it. So you're very limited on the things that you can buy and what you could buy and what you could interact with. And it's such a fascinating thing, right? And it's so easy to reach a mass audience that we try to um, make things that are valuable for everybody, and then they become valuable for nobody. So figuring out what is valuable for your audience is really, really important. I don't think enough people who create content or try to make money online or try to make, use social media to further some point, message, cause. I don't think they spend enough time considering what value is and shortcut that, thinking that people will like understand that the value comes after they pay. I don't, I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm gonna leave it kind of at that. Um, okay, yeah. So that leads into the idea of like relationships over everything, right? That's kind of one of those first principles type of things, just like clear communication, right? Communication is the heart of everything. So are relationships. Um, the reason, that kind of other side of the coin, for why we have been successful as a species is not only were we able to communicate our ideas to another person, but we were able to form relationships that allowed us to work together to help us survive. Because we are a very weak species as far as like the animal kingdom is concerned. One on one, like dogs and cats can probably kill us. Um, Dogs can definitely kill us, um, fairly easily. But together, two, three, four, five humans together can overpower pretty much any species. Now that we have technology that we can easily dominate any species. And that's all because of relationships, right? We are hardwired at our core to seek, want, and crave relationships to, and that's why it's so hard for people to do the weird thing or say the weird thing and risk disappointing those relationships, because to disappoint, the close relationships you had would mean to be kicked out of the tribe or the community, which meant certain death, right? So the people who went against the grain for most of history were kind of weeded out because they didn't survive and they didn't last. Like no parent is going to let their child marry and have children with the tribal asshole who's going against everybody, right? That's not going to happen, especially when you have 50, 100, 150 people. You're very protective of that. So to go against our tribes, our communities, the identities that we have is very difficult for us. Um, but what's really tough right now is up until social media and the internet, most of what we knew as kind of that tribe and that community was very physically close to us, which meant they had very similar life experiences, very similar lessons and upbringings and things like that. So we all, for the most part, kind of held very similar beliefs and had that one kind of main primary identity within that community. But the problem now is with social media, we're able to have all these different identities, different communities that can sometimes often be kind of co-competing, where to continue holding one identity means having to let go of an old identity, or reaching towards a new identity that you want means letting go of old identities and alienating or excommunicating yourself from communities and tribes that you had positive, beneficial relationships with up until that point, right? That's why at its core, it's so hard for us to change and make changes, really significant life changes, is because that lonely period where we're in between the communities, in between the tribes, where, we're not quite the identity of the new tribe. We're not quite an in member of that new tribe yet. But also we're too different, too weird to be a part of the old tribe. And that lonely period, it feels like death, right? Um, I know it's interesting thought that I had in my conversation with my friend this morning. So yeah, and that's kind of the fun part of creating content this way is like sharing some of those ideas and insights, really. And I think that's where a lot of people fail to see as value, right? Is insights. Insights can many times be much more valuable than practical how to's, implementing systems, doing different things, because those insights have the ability to shift beliefs, change your values, help you identify new identities, different things like that, or understand that someone else has gone through this experience or a similar experience and has persevered and made it through, right? That insight alone can be everything that we need or that someone in your audience needs to finally do the thing, right? I'm sure you had moments like that in your life. I know I have had many moments like that throughout my life where a certain insight has really kind of shifted gears or set me in a new direction or set me down a new path or course. And, maybe that's something I'll try to think about and figure out some of the main insights I've been given over the years. That could be a cool piece of content. Um, okay, perfect. Yeah, this does flow pretty well, right? So insights. Um, the reason why insights are so valuable is they can give you a change in perspective. And what is the guy's name now? He is one of the VPs at Ogilvy Advertising. Really smart dude, but he talks about a change in perspective is worth 80 IQ points. And he talks about this great story where the London Underground was going to do all these things to upgrade their trains to make them faster, run better, all that stuff. And it was going to cost something like $4 billion. It's like, well, hold on. Like, if we look at this a different way, we can come up with like a far more efficient solution or effective solution. It's just kind of run through these crazy ideas. Like, here, you could pay some of the most beautiful people in the world to serve champagne and caviar on every train ride and still, not even come close to spending $4 billion. And people will be begging you to make the trains run slower, right? So that's an equally effective solution. Maybe equally effective is a poor word. There's also an effective solution, completely different. Another one, and the one I think they end up going with, is just putting real-time updates of how long people need to wait, right? Because what they found out is not that they wanted the trains to get there faster. They just wanted to know how long they had to wait. It was the uncertainty, the lack of clarity, the unclear communication of when the train will arrive, if it's on time, if it's late, right? That was the real problem that needed to be solved. So rather than spending billions of dollars upgrading the whole rail system, they spent a few million and installed these real-time monitors. So that's such a fascinating thing. And what it kind of reminds me of is if you try to find a fun or interesting solution to a problem, it really kind of opens up the doors to how you can think about it, right? Because if we focus too much on the problem and trying to, understand and figure out and dissect the problem, we kind of stick in this like almost negative or closed off mindset, this constrained mindset because it's all around the problem. But if we give ourselves the ability to find a fun or interesting solution, maybe the permission, we can yield very different results. For example, it's snowing here in northern Wisconsin, and the pup and I went on our walk through the woods. We get back, and he is all full of, snow and wet and stuff like that. I have to towel him off, and he does not like being toweled off. It's usually a little bit of a struggle, things like that. And the other thing too is most mornings we get back from our walk, and he's still a little jazzed up, so he wants to play and wrestle a little bit before he goes down for his mid-morning nap. And, both of those things have been time where we butt heads in the morning often, like I'll try to dry him off and he'll be dancing around and trying to get away from me and stuff like that. And then, I'll be trying to get some work done and he's gonna be sitting there begging and whining for me to play with him and stuff like that. So this morning, I'm just, for whatever spurred, to find a fun solution, we turned the drying off time into wrestling time, and I let him, just mouth and bite and nip a little bit like he likes to do. And I was pushing him around and wrestling and grabbing his paws, and he was kind of jumping up on me. And, I'd grab his paws and wipe him off with a towel. And I'd go and try to grab him and I'd wipe him off with a towel. So we ended up having a ton of fun wrestling around and playing around for a couple minutes. And he ended up being way drier than, the 20 seconds he lets me dry him off normally. So it worked out really well. We both had a lot of fun doing it, had my morning going better. He went and passed out on the couch. So I don't know. It's just fun when you try to shift that perspective or give your permission to have a little bit of a perspective shift. Let's see what next. What next? Oh, people want to be entertained, right? Um, that's where like fun solutions can be so awesome because, again, it goes back to most of human history. We grew up on stories and verbal communication, right? A lot of people don't realize is like, yes, life was really hard, for a long time. Also, because it was hard, we were very lazy, right? We hunted for food, we got our food, and then after that, we just kind of sat around because we wanted to conserve as much calories as possible. Our brains eat up something like 20 to 30% of our calories every single day. So it's very calorie dense. So the least movement we can do, better, right? So what would we do? We'd sit around and talk, right? We'd hang out in groups, we'd talk, tell stories, things like that. And that's really what people want. That's why people veg out in front of Netflix or TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is, for hours upon hours and upon hours and don't do quote unquote productive things. Like these productive things for most of human history were not productive to survival because they were taxing and, very calorically taxing, and we didn't have the calories to spare. So it was very natural to want to sit around and just be entertained. Like that is kind of like what we're evolutionarily programmed to do, again, because the people who are out running around all the time and exercising for fun, well, they would probably starve to death when there wasn't enough food to go around. And the people who were sitting around doing a bunch of nothing, they had the extra calories to spare. So people really just want to be entertained. And one of my favorite recent examples of that are the Savannah Bananas. We just got back from spring break trip and saw Savannah Banana in the game. If you've seen them on social media, the game is 10 times better in person. They just go so far out of their way to provide a great experience. And I got to see a great little clip from the guy who started what he calls Banana Ball, which is, I didn't even realize is kind of a new form of baseball he's trying to promote, just like he talks about, like we have boxing and now we have UFC, right? Like they're both good. They're different. One kind of grew out of the other. It got some hate for a while, but now it's a very popular sport. And this Banana Ball that he's trying to promote has some really crazy rules, like 2-hour time limit, no walks. If a fan catches a ball, they're out. No mound visits. You can't step out of the batter's box. Like all these fun, different things that help speed up the game, make it go faster, make it be more entertaining to watch. And I think it could be a cool next evolution of baseball, especially, trying to get kids to play baseball and enjoy baseball is really tough today. I coach Little League Baseball for my kids' team, and it's a slow game. And these kids who are used to swiping up every time they get a little bit bored, like they don't want to sit there and, spend 5 or 10 minutes just hands on their knees, waiting, hoping the kid who, hasn't hit a ball all season is going to hit one to them. Right. And if you can find entertaining solutions to whatever problems you're trying to solve, um, I think you're going to have a much better chance of success and a much better time finding that success, right? I was talking to a friend recently who has been working on a startup for several years, and they've, done some really, really cool stuff with it. And it just was never quite what it needed to be. And a lot of it was because it had gotten so far outside of like what he loved doing and like why he kind of originally got into the space in the first place. And it's like when I finally realized that and, like got back to doing that just simply because I need to make money, he's like, then it all clicked and we took this hard pivot with our startup. And now he's like, people are beating down our door to give us money. Like we went from thinking, oh, maybe we'll raise like 200,000 to kind of get this going to looking at 4.3 million or a few $1 million. And it's just crazy. And then people just saying like, hey, like where do I send money to? How much can I give? And if you just follow that and follow the interesting solution or the weird solution, the fun solution that only you can probably come up with, that's great. Like that's kind of my take on creating content is like hopping on calls with clients every other week and just talking about what they're doing, like having that coffee conversation, having that human to human conversation instead of just being like, hey, here's a script, here's things to say. Try to read off a teleprompter and look into this camera and go, right? That's not very fun. And I think this is a lot more fun, really a lot more interesting, because, and it also has this cool mass effect too, because like the more conversations you have with more different people, the more interesting viewpoints that you can put into, your unique human experience that you can then draw on when you have conversations with other people. Like I can't tell you how often I am talking with one person and like, oh my God, that reminds me of a conversation I had with this person about this thing and they said this, or I listened to this thing on this interview that these people were talking about reminds me of this, or lends evidence to what you were just saying, or lends credence to what I'm saying, and it's just, it becomes this very cool flywheel spider web type of thing that just kind of keeps growing and evolving. I think that's a lot of fun, and that's really interesting to me, and that's, I think, a cool way to, or something cool to pursue, right? And I think that's really goes back to kind of that core premise or hypothesis about the future of work and being, these personal brands and solopreneurs are really interested in one problem that, a small group of people are interested in having solved, but they love putting their life around solving that problem or thinking about that interesting thing. Like look how many people had made careers out of literally just having conversations, right? Talk show hosts, the Joe Rogans, Bill Maher's, the Chris Williamson's, Diary of a CEO, like all the Coffee Hour, like all these people are, making careers and making livings off of just having conversations with people. So, there's all sorts of different ways that people find value and what they find valuable and what they're willing to pay for it and who they're willing to pay, right? I think that's another really fascinating thing. And a good buddy of mine always says is like, you and I could say the same thing to the same group of people, standing right next to each other, and they would receive it two totally different ways, right? There will be some people in the audience who will absolutely vehemently disagree with the way I say something and love the way you say it, and vice versa. And there will be some people who want to work with me just for the fact of being me, for whatever reason that we have no idea of, and vice versa, right? So, don't discount your uniqueness and your unique experiences, even if you're trying to solve a very common problem, right? Case in point of how many different fitness routines and programs and modalities and equipment and stuff like that exists. And for the most part, they all work to varying levels of success and degrees and for different people. and different things like that. It's just everybody's perception of value when it comes to picking fitness routines, modalities is different. Um, and there's no right or wrong, right? And I think that's something that we need to start to realize and understand now that we can all talk to each other about anything at any time, no matter how we're feeling, and hide behind keyboards. Is that most people aren't as bad as you think and aren't as different than you believe. And it's usually only a couple topics that might really fire you up. And if you just have a conversation, good, honest conversation, and that's why I like long form interviews with people. And I think it's very easy to fake who you are in small segments. When it's easy to script something or easy to memorize a few bullet points. But if you listen to someone for 2 or 3 hours, talking about something, I think you can get a really, really good idea of who they are, what they're about, how honest they are, different things like that. Because you can pick up on those different patterns, different ways of, like how they speak. That was again, kind of goes back to what I was saying. Is like I was having a conversation with a friend and we were talking about if you pay attention to how someone speaks about a topic or a subject, you can tell a lot about them, like what they focus on, as far as like maybe like success, like how they talk about success, whether it's, making a lot of money. Like if my company hits $10 million a year, that's successful versus, if I help 1,000 people make $100,000, that's what I consider successful. Or, if success to me is never missing a kid's game or recital or whatever, or success to you means being able to go on 4 vacations a year, right? Like how you talk about things, how you define things, says a lot about what you value. And I think if you kind of pay attention to that over the course of long form content, a long form interview with someone, that's the best way to get an understanding of who they are, because it's hard to fake. And, along those lines, um, oh, yes. Flip side of that coin is, how a question is phrased or worded, gives you a lot of information too. I don't think enough people pay attention to, everything that a question, all the information that's in a question before they answer it. And I think that goes back to, the asynchronous communication, like trying to highly edit our communication, things like that, is there's just so much information in questions. I'm trying to think of a good example. Doesn't come to me, but, um, I think, oh, here, like kind of to wrap it up, because I'm almost done. So like when you're having conversations with friends, you can often get away with unclear communication because as their friend, like either they don't want to hurt your feelings or it's not important enough for them to like question, or they don't really understand it enough to really say anything. So you just kind of move on with the conversation. But when you are creating content, putting it out online, putting it out on social media, and you're getting feedback from people who don't know based on like if they're watching it, if they're not watching it, are you getting likes, things like that, retention time where people fall off, you get a much clearer understanding and clearer picture of how clear and well you are articulating, ideas that you believe are important, right? And I think that's, to loop it all the way back around, where creating content can be this huge driver for personal growth, in all areas of your life, because it kind of stress tests a lot of the ideas and things that you think and see how they perform, in a real life situation. So, and rather than kind of get discouraged if something that you say doesn't pop off, I think it's much a much more beneficial and useful belief to say, hey, what's a different way I can say this that I think people will understand? And that kind of pursuit and iteration philosophy is just a lot more fun. So that's what I'm going to sign off and leave you with today. So till tomorrow.